Has Lotus lost its mind under its new Chinese owner, or is there some method behind the madness? Today we're gonna find out. My name is Peter, I'm from Autogevoel, and this is the Lotus Emeya. It's a Hyper GT, a word you wouldn't necessarily associate with Lotus, but I'm gonna promise you, at the end of the video you'll see that there is method to the madness. Hyper GT is something a bit exotic maybe, but still very functional. And this car is certainly exotic. There is a ton of technology in here. I'm gonna talk you through all those facts. And there's a ton of things happening in and around the car. But first of all, looking at it, it's more than 2 meters 10 wide. It's more than 5 meters 10 long. So it is a huge vehicle, but it competes with a Porsche Taycan, for example. So it makes sense in a way. Here in the front, you have these aggressive daytime running lights and some pretty aggressive angles, but it's still somewhat of an organic shape, maybe even a sensual shape if you want to say it. Already some details like these air vents here, they are real, full functional. So there's an air curtain here going down the car, also cooling the brakes. It's the same at the rear. So basically everything you see is actually functional, unlike a lot of other manufacturers that sort of put fake vents and all those things in. Not the case here. The same thing goes down here. Openings for the radiator and the cooling of the battery and the air conditioning and so on. This all moves depending on your driving modes and what your driving style is, obviously, and the demands of the car. This car has the optional mirror screens, like you'll see later inside. You can also just have a normal mirror here, but this is another 1, 2, 3 cameras only just here. So that gives you a bit of a sense of what this car is all about. It's a technology monster. There's 3 versions. There's the base Emeya, there's the S, which is this one, and then it's the R. That is the extreme 900 horsepower one. This one sits in the middle. So with the extreme version, you also get even bigger brakes, slightly different wheels. And this is still very much sports car, very much a lot of performance, but still in the middle of the range. In this two-tone yellow black, I think it's quite in your face. Personally, I wouldn't order it in this color, but it is kind of cool that you can see all the details, like for example, this carbon spoiler here. You can see it just that much better with this bright color. Speaking of vents, here's another one. Also, again, my whole arm can go in. It's all real. This goes to the rear tires and the rear brakes, but obviously that's for the air curtain down the car, and then it comes out here. If you go a bit further down, as you can see, carbon here for the diffuser. Yeah, it's again the same thing. There's a lot of sort of hard lines here, but it's still somewhat organic and sensual in a way as well. We have about 500 liters of boot space. Depending a bit, of course, you can put the seats down back there for even more space, but you can see here 2 pieces of hand luggage for me and the cameraman. More than enough for a weekend or even longer away. Underneath, we have a little cubby hole, charging cable maybe, and since we are in Germany, our Verbandkasten, obviously. Nice little extra storage here, nothing going wrong. Besides a big boot, obviously we've got to have a look at the frunk, because there is a frunk, even though it is not much, but it is enough for your charging cables. I think this is really all you want from a frunk. I don't need a place to store half my ski holiday luggage. I just need a place to put my charging cables when the boot is full. Because there's nothing worse than having a full boot with a false floor and then you got to take all your luggage out before you can get to your charging cable. So that's nice.
So we have to talk about charging. Now they are all based on the same 102 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery, and they all have the same 800 volt architecture. So each version can do the same in terms of charging, meaning that at home you can charge up to 22 kilowatt, and when you go for the fast charging, then you can go up to 400 kilowatts, which is of course crazy high. This means that you can charge the Emeya from 10 to 80%, which is the industry standard of course, in, they claim, 14 minutes. That's a record they've set. But normally speaking, you're probably going to be closer to 20. Range is about 500 kilometers.
Let's get inside, because obviously that's where you'll be spending most of your day. Now the interior is of course highly dependent on the options and the packages and the styling and even the version of the car that you pick. But Lotus is very big on sustainable materials. So a lot of what you see in here is highly recycled, highly sustainable, and also the whole manufacturing process is being looked at to keep that as sustainable as possible. So that is kudos for Lotus to make that effort in order to move into the future, which I think makes sense. In this day and age, that is definitely something that you have to think about as a car maker. You can see the screen over here. And you can see, if I step in it, hello, how well they're working. It is something you get used to quite quickly. There's a lot of muscle memory involved with looking in your mirror, where you look and how you look. It's no different here, but you have to unlearn what you know before, obviously. So it's a bit of a love-hate maybe for some people, but I can guarantee you after driving it for a few hours, you get used to it quite quickly. The door itself. It's a Lotus, so no cheap plastics or anything here. It's all soft touch. kind of suede-like or Alcantara-like. Same thing here, all soft touch. The colors, again, depending on what you want. Nice high-end stereo system here. Even though this is the normal version, you can even upgrade that further. There's no door handle either. You get a button instead to open the door. Don't really think that's necessary, but it does look nice. Other than that, you do have traditional window controls and some locking controls over there. Once you step inside and you sit into the seats, you sit low, you feel covered by the car. It's a very nice feeling. It's a very minimalistic view forward with a relatively small steering wheel and a small display here in front of me. So, cockpit overview. Obviously, the main thing that dominates the experience is this giant screen here in the middle. Now, the screen deserves a bit of special attention because it is powered by the Unreal gaming engine, which means they can do quite a lot with the graphics and the way this operates. It's buttery smooth, which is just such a pleasure to operate. It is still just a normal infotainment system, so it does everything that you expect. So here we have the car in the wrong color, by the way. But that means that you can do things like the roof and the charging and your phone and your navigation and everything you want, really. So it is nice, but you can see by the way it moves and the smoothness of the operation, it really feels like a game almost. And it's just super nice. So that's very well done, very much worth the extra mile that Lotus has went. So that's quite nice, and I think it's very much worth the extra mile that Lotus went to make this work this smooth. Because again, it is a big car, it's a nice car, it's a Lotus, something special, this car. So you want this to be special as well. And there's nothing worse than a car that's let down by a bad infotainment system. So that's good. In front of me, the steering wheel, it has a ton of buttons, anything from your cruise control to your toggles to your driving modes, lights, stalks and everything that you expect, but done the Lotus way. So I said earlier already, everything feels real. It's cold to the touch and it's just a pleasure to operate that way. Just like the screen is a pleasure to operate, everything that you do here manually is also nice. So here on the right, I can change my driving modes. Here on the left, I can change my regen braking, and with these toggles over here, I can do anything from cruise control to recharging and everything. There's a little display in front of me here. So a lot of the operations that you do here will show on the little display. And then in front of me, there's a head-up display with basically the same information. You can put your Navi there and everything. Moving down the cabin, you see a phone here. That's an inductive charging pad here with some Alcantara lining. This is the key, by the way. It's a Lotus Pebble. With just one button on it to lock and unlock it. I'm not really sure. Oh, yeah, exactly. That's the problem with it. It's a bit small and I'm sure you can put a lanyard on it somewhere, but wow, not so sure about that. We have the phone inductive charging here, some carbon fiber trim. Obviously the materials and the options here are highly depend on the spec that you pick. We have some switches here in the middle still for manual operation, so not everything is done in the screen. We have our driving modes, so rear, neutral and drive and park. Over here we have some vent controls and some air conditioning controls, so also quite nice and simple, even though you can also operate them here in the screen, and this row of buttons is here permanently. Two cup holders here, as you can see, easily hold your thermos flask. They are a little bit adjustable, but not too much. This is all so nice, these details also here around the edges, just makes you feel a bit more special. When we open this up, nice and deep. That's pretty good. And there is a little USB, as you can see here, if you want to put some music or anything for the infotainment system. And obviously you can also charge here. And there's even a 12-volt socket down there. There's also a panoramic roof in this one, which deserves a bit of special attention. You can see here that the roof is divided up in sections because it's photochromic glass. So I can turn the top ones on and the middle ones on and the back ones on. And then you can see that you get this pattern in the roof. I can also turn them off again. You can see them change. I'm not really sure how functional it is to have these triangles, but I'm sure they thought that through. But it is kind of cool that you can open and close parts of the roof that way, the way you want it. So you can have some more light here in the front, for example, and some more light in the rear, but have the middle part closed. Gives you a bit something to play with, which is probably fun once or twice, but I'm pretty sure you'll most of the time either go for the full clear or the full matte version. Last but not least, the rear. Let's have a look. It is the same quality in here as you get in the front, so everything you touch is soft and real. You get some carbon here and some window controls, and opening the door is the same button. Sitting here behind an adult, you can see how vast the space is. It's an over 3-meter wheelbase, so obviously a lot of that interior space is coming from there, but it is truly enormous, so that is actually quite nice. The seats are also relatively slim, so it is easy to see past the seats, so that actually creates a lot of air here in the back as well. This lump is quite large, and we obviously have the panoramic roof, so when I sit too far to the side, my head here hits the roof. But I do have enough space here. I'm about 183 tall, so adults can sit here, no problem. Thing to notice is that your feet don't really have space under the seat. I can't put my feet under any further than this. So if you're really tall here in the back, that's not going to be comfortable. And even tall kids might not like this. But there is enough space here to move around, so that is good. Little pocket here in the back of the seat that will probably fit your phone, but nothing more. Yeah, so that is purely there to put something and not really to use it. Then, moving along here to the middle, obviously harder and less comfortable. I'm sitting here, I'm touching the roof with my head, so this is not the spot where you want to sit as an adult. But if I move on and sit behind myself, you can again see how much space I have. So that it's quite comfortable, and these seats are contoured as well, so it's a real seat. And even with my enormously broad shoulders, I still fit in here. So it's actually quite nice and comfortable. The foot thing does come into play here when I sit behind myself, that there is not so much space for me to sit. And especially annoying because you can't move your feet into a natural position. So that is not worrying, but slightly annoying. Then we have a little screen here in the back for your controls of your HVAC, your air conditioning. You have some quick access buttons here on what you want to do in terms of screen brightness. You can even control the sunroof that we saw earlier, and you control what kind of sound you want to have back here. So, pretty extensive what you can do there. Nice for the rear passengers without having to always go to the front to get things done. Overall, you're very comfortable here in the back. It doesn't really matter if you're an adult or a teenager or a small kid. More than enough space here to travel comfortably. If you are a small kid or if you have small children, the ISOFIX points are under this flap here with Velcro. You can reach those this way. Last thing to mention here is the armrest. Nothing in it, nice and clean. I like that. It's always the worst when there's cup holders here and your elbow disappears in them. The cup holders are here in the front.
Now, this is a Lotus, so obviously it has to be a driver's car. Let's find out together. We're putting it in sport mode, everything turns red, the seats shrink around you, and the whole car starts to feel tight. Blasting up the hill here, obviously a lot of performance available, but no issues, and you really feel the car getting tight, which is nice. And you can stomp on the brakes for these tight turns, and even though that it is a big car on these relatively tight roads, you can really place it well. Going over the lines a little bit here and there, but it's nice to just chuck it into these corners. And then even when you get a bus coming down the hill, no problem, a lot of confidence in where the car is and what it's doing. You can really feel that front end biting and making sure that you have the confidence to turn in. Sadly, there's always a bit of traffic to catch up with, but it gives you a bit of a taste on how exciting this car is when you really put it all up to number 11.
Driving here into some smaller towns, it's totally civilized. You put the powertrain in comfort, or tour as they call it. You can even put it in range mode where they dial it back even further. So that's just the eco mode. It's very relaxing, good to place, it's quiet. You get a bit of noise from the big tires, of course. And I have to say, there's no way around the size of the car. Over 2 meters wide is something that you do notice when the roads get a bit narrower. So that's definitely something to keep into account. Luckily, I can see out quite well. I can see the corners of the car quite easily, and I can even raise my seat quite a bit. So it's not difficult to place, but it is something to definitely consider, that you're always thinking about the size of the car. And I'm sure if you own this car for longer, then it will shrink around you a little bit, which it also does when we get to a bit more open like here, and there's room for a bit more spirited driving. Then I pull the pedal on my right and it goes to sport mode. I can feel the seat tightening around me, and then we have a bit more room to give it some go, and there is plenty of go. It's swoops you through the corners like it's nobody's business. Obviously, adaptive suspension all around, that nice four-wheel drive security. With the weight, it is planted. I don't know how this will feel on the track, but on this sort of more winding style of road, it's excellent. Another thing that stands out, both in the high-speed driving but also in the lower-speed driving, is the overall refinement of the car. This is Lotus's sort of first attempt at this modern version of a Hyper GT car, but it all makes sense. And thanks to the underpinnings of the Elettra, obviously they have some experience, like the things like the camera mirrors, for example. That software has been updated a few times already, and this car will continue to receive over-the-air updates as well. But you can tell that refinement is there, and it's nice, and it works the way it should. And it makes it also, it gives you a lot of confidence in both the high and the low speed driving, that you can have that refinement when you want to, and that nothing will feel like it's not in control at any point. That's actually quite impressive. As far as cabin ergonomics go, it all works as intended. Like I mentioned earlier, these cup holders, they do get in the way of you operating anything down here. So that is, I wouldn't say a full design flaw, but definitely something to note. The mirrors, obviously this has the optional camera mirrors that I showed earlier. It's mostly muscle memory that you're used to look over here instead of down there. So you have to just retrain yourself to make that happen. But overall, you can see quite a bit. We haven't tried them in the dark yet, but I can imagine that especially in the dark and when it's raining, it might be even better than standard mirrors. But that's personal preference, of course. It is an optional extra. Interesting thing to note, actually, is that the mirror here inside is just a regular mirror. So interesting that they've gone for the option there, but not the option here. So, after a day of driving the Lotus Emeya, what can we make of it? Is it indeed a Hyper GT? Has Lotus succeeded? The word Hyper GT, though, that's a marketing talk. I don't really like those kind of terms, but if we objectively look at the car, it is a GT car. It's not a full-on race car, sports car situation. Is it hyper? I suppose, because it has a lot of horsepower and everything, but you know. It does deliver on the GT promise, though. It is comfortably seating 4 adults. It's comfortably seating your whole family. It has a big boot. It has a frunk. It ticks all the boxes that you want from a GT car. It has a big battery and a big range. So, in essence, nothing going wrong. So, Hyper GT it is. Would I pick it over a Taycan? I don't know. I think that's personal preference. If you like a German brand and a German manufacturer versus a British one that does things slightly different. But overall, I think as the concept that Lotus set out to build, they've succeeded in creating that concept. I would pick this one over the Electric because I prefer this body style much more. And overall, I think it is job well done. They've succeeded in creating what they wanted to create, and I think that is highly commendable. That's all I got for you in this video. This is Peter from Autogevoel. I'll catch you guys in the next one.